Alright, and we are back. Right now we are going to go over chapter 15 from our lovely book, How to Stay Young by Christian D. Larson. And today is Friday the 29th, and it is 12:14 p.m. p.m. in the afternoon, and we are going to move on in the next chapter. So, covering the last chapter, we had read that we need to live for the mind, we need to live for the body, and we need to live for the soul. We need to live for all of these aspects of who we are in order to live a full life, a full, whole, and happy life. And Wallace D. Wattles says this exact same thing in The Science of Being, or The Science of Getting Rich as well, because he explains the concept of getting rich and why it's necessary for people to have money. You know, we can't live a full and happy life if we don't have the enough material power to be able to live a full and happy life. You know, to be able to provide ourselves with the food that we need, to be able to provide ourselves and to buy the type of books we need, to be able to have those things for the advancement and the full development of the soul. We need to learn how to not only just live physically for the body, we need to learn how the economy works as well, which is why our financial fitness books helps us so much, because the economy is a world that exists within the physical world, and we do need to know how money works, because we could use those things to help us grow even more. And when we have that material power, we'll be able to help so many more people out on the outside, you know, because I would love to build a school one day. I would love to help build a school, like the greatest school in the world, not your average go learn math, English, none of that. No, not that school. A spiritual school, a school of real knowledge and the knowledge of mind and of the body and real knowledge that brings you into full circle, and not just how to teach you math and whatnot. That is very important. Not saying anything against it, but when people don't even know about their own mind, then there's something that there's a new school that needs to be made, or at least some type of thing that helps people learn about it, which is where we come in, right? Because we're working on ourselves, we're working on our dream, and we know in order to have that dream, we need to become the person necessary to bring that dream into reality. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 15. Live in the upper story and on to the sunny side. When we live in the upper story, we always look younger, and we always look older when we live in the lower story. In like manner, we look older when we live in the shady side, on the shady side, and younger when we live on the sunny side. These are facts that have been universally demonstrated, and are therefore highly important to those who have resolved to stay young. The reason why the appearance of the personality as to age is affected by these different attitudes of mind may be readily found through a careful study of the chemistry of life. Conditions of age or conditions of youth are chemical conditions, and chemical conditions of the human system may be directly modified by changing attitudes of mind. Now, I know we've already mentioned this in a few of the chapters before getting up to this point, but since he did bring it up again, we're going to bring it up again. Now, we've learned that the human body is nothing but chemical reactions, and in fact, the only difference between a male and a female is simply because a male, the male system, it produces more of the hormone testosterone within the body, and simply because a man has more of this hormone that is testosterone is what makes him a man. Okay, and then a female has more of the hormone estrogen. Okay, and the estrogen is what makes a female a female, while testosterone is what makes a male a male. Men and women both have estrogen and testosterone, just men have more testosterone and women have more estrogen, and that difference makes the difference within their gender, because it's chemical. It's a chemical condition, and we have the ability to create chemical conditions in our mind. You know, when we think thoughts of stress and negativity and we're stressing, where what is happening is the body will respond to that by generating cortisol, releasing cortisol within the bloodstream. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it breaks down the cells and tissues of the body. And the human system may be directly modified by changing attitudes of mind. To live in the upper story of mind is to gain consciousness of more life, and the increase of life invariably produces rejuvenation. And it's funny he says that, because this is a direct explanation to the placebo effect, you know, with science, and how they give their clients a fake treatment, but they didn't let their clients know that, and the clients believe that it was a real treatment, and then they get better. You know, how did this happen? How did this occur when this doctor gives them something that technically won't help them, you know, but they believe that it's going to help them? And it's that self-belief within their own mind that creates the conditions of health within their own body. This is how metaphysical healing has been discovered, because as we were talking, the body, the subconscious mind, the unconscious part of our being is constantly working to automatically keep this body healthy and working. You know, millions of cells are dying every second, while at the same time millions of cells are being created without any of our awareness of what is happening. You know, if a person doesn't educate themselves on the body, they could live their entire life without being aware of how it works. It's not going to change the way that it works already. You know, it's amazing. And when we bring our conscious mind in congruence with the subconscious, and the metaphysical in partnership with the physical, because they're already partners, then we'll be able to stay young, because we're living with the correct way of thinking. We have a correct way, an outlook of looking at it. To live in the upper story of mind is to gain consciousness of more life, and the increase of life invariably produces rejuvenation. This same attitude also produces an expanding condition in the mind. The mind feels larger when we live in the upper story, and what we feel in the mind will be expressed in the body. In consequence, the expanding actions of mind will affect the chemical actions of the body and will cause the cells to expand to their full capacity. Expanded cells look young and are full of vigor, while withered cells look old and are almost lifeless. To give the cells of the body the expanding tendency will also cause those cells to constantly grow and develop. And where all the cells of the body are growing cells, old age conditions cannot possibly gain a foothold. When the mind lives in the lower story, all actions of mind become depressed and contracted, and according to the same law, the cells of the body will contract, wither, feel weak, and look old. They have to, because they have to express what is happening within the mind. Such cells will soon begin to ossify, because if a person dies, for example, and the life force of that person leaves, the body will begin to deteriorate. All the cells of the body will begin to die. That is because consciousness, spirit, life is living through this material plane, but it is not this material plane. It's immaterial, it's intangible, but it's living through, it's expressing itself, it's living through the material plane. There's no other words I could think of for it right now. Such cells will begin to ossify, and when ossification sets in, the entire system will begin to grow old. Mental depression also has a tendency to check the forces of growth, and the human system always begins to grow old when it ceases to grow. To live on the dark side of life is to place the mind in a pessimistic attitude, and while in this attitude the mind sees only failure, defeat, and smallness of things, and the uselessness of things. And what have we talked about? And as this mind continues to think along those lines, It is creating that state of consciousness within itself. It moves into that state of being, that energy. And as we've learned, that negative energy contracts, while positive energy expands. When you go into that negative state of mind, you're contracting, and then you start you don't think as big, you don't feel as big, because you're not as big. And you'll begin to bring those things around you and group them. The external world will change in order to meet with your changed consciousness. It has to. The human system always begins to grow old when it ceases to grow. To live in the dark side of life is to place the mind in the pessimistic attitude, and while in this attitude the mind sees only failure, defeat, the smallness of things, and the uselessness of things. Such thoughts and mental states produce retrograding tendencies, and when such tendencies begin to act in the body, the forces of growth will be reversed. The cells of the body will consequently go down to weakness, decay, age, and death. Nothing can grow and develop where darkness prevails. The perpetual growth in every part of the system is necessary if youth is to be retained. To live on the sunny side of life is to place the mind in the attitude of progress and advancement. That's something. It is the law that the mind invariably moves towards that something upon which its attention is directed. Therefore, when the mind is facing the sunny states of life, it will create within itself a tendency to move towards that light. Now I want to talk a little bit about a key word that he mentioned is attention. Before I started reading this book and going over this chapter with you guys, I was listening to an audio, Practical Mental Influence. I've listened to this audio many times. It's by William Walker Atkinson. It's one of my favorite books to read and to listen to, and he talks about the power of vibrations and everything that we're learning right now. And it's also another book of science. You know, specific observations were made to prove the reality of everything that we're reading. It's all science. It's not metaphysics. As much as I love metaphysics and I study metaphysics, it's not religion. You know, as much as I studied or have looked into religion, because, you know, God doesn't limit himself to religions. He doesn't limit himself to churches. He doesn't limit himself to science. He doesn't limit himself to anything. You know, God reveals himself to all those who seek him in many different ways. Many different ways. He's not limited to one thing. And this power of attention in the book Practical Mental Influence, because he talks about concentration and what concentration means. And he's saying con is to bring, and centrate is to center. So you're bringing to center. When you're concentrating your thoughts, you're bringing your thoughts centered. You're centering your thoughts on a specific point. Now remember how we learned in the Master Key System, and I'm going to use this analogy again with the magnifying glass and the sunlight. Okay, when we think, you know, we're creating, and we need to emotionalize our thoughts in order to really give our thoughts power. You know, with the sun and the magnifying glass is likened to our conscious mind, the self-aware mind, while the sun could be likened to the subconscious mind, the solar mind, the mind that radiates energy, while this mind directs that energy. So as the subconscious is as being likened to the sun, is just you know, radiating energy, has energy flowing out of it from all sorts of in all directions. Okay, when we take that magnifying glass and we focus that magnifying glass on a specific point, okay, what happens? What have we learned that happens? That ray from the sunlight focuses, it concentrates, and it creates like a laser beam of light. And if we have that laser beam focus on something, you know, if we have it focused on a paper, it's going to catch that paper on fire. Why? Because we're concentrating that energy, and we're just strengthening it. And it's the exact same thing with this. And when we think, when we concentrate our mind, when we concentrate all of our mental forces in one specific task, just like that ray from the sunlight that's going to catch that paper on fire, the ray from your thoughts is going to break through whatever material thing is standing in your way. Remember, it's mind. It's all mind. It is with the mind that we're fighting. It's in the mind that we're fighting. And in the Bible, it says that man does not wage against flesh or blood, but by spiritual principles. the power of thought. However this spirit decides to employ his own thinking, whether it be good or bad, is going to determine where he's at on the moral scale, and will determine whether he's going to be someone that represents the light that is in this world, or he's going to be a part of the darkness and not overcome this world. So, moving on. Such thoughts and mental states have retrograding tendencies, and when such tendencies begin to act in the body, the forces of growth will be reversed. The cells of the body will consequently go down to weaken, decay, age, and death. Sorry, I had something that was just bothering me right here. This little booger. Nothing can grow and develop where darkness prevails. Freaking Corey. And perpetual growth in every part of the system is necessary if youth is to be retained. To live on the sunny side of life is to place the mind in the attitude of progress and advancement. It is the law that the mind invariably moves towards that something upon which its attention is directed. Therefore, when the mind is facing the sunny states of life, it will create within itself a tendency to move towards the light. And to move toward the light is to enter constantly into more and more light. And the key to moving towards the light is self-affirmations. What you tell yourself and what you are thinking. That let there be light. The universal sacred imperative that if you're having trouble letting your own light shine, just say the affirmation, let there be light. Just let there be light. Like God said, let there be light, and then there was light. Same thing with you. Let there be light in your life. Let your light shine. Just radiate. Just be out there and just be you. Just be Corey. Just be, whoever it is that you're called to be. Be whoever it is that you want to be. Be whoever it is that you always see yourself as, and act from it. Be it. Live it. Because that is the only way you're going to be able to live as that. To increase the light of the mind is to promote the advancement of the entire being of man, and continuous advancement invariably means perpetual youth. To live in mental brightness will also polish, refine, spiritualize the entire system. And while the refining or spiritualizing process is in action, retrogression, ossification, and decay and age are impossible. And I know I had mentioned in another book, or not in another book, in another chapter while reading this book, on how he talks about the exact same concept in every single chapter, just in a different way. Like this one, he's saying to live in mental brightness. Now he's talking about living in mental brightness that is going to be the same as living, in the now, in the now of things, and not allowing our mind to not allow negative thoughts to enter into the mind. Look at that. Brightness will also polish, refine, spiritualize the entire system. And while the refining or spiritualization process is in action, retrogression, ossification, decay, and age are impossible. All the words he uses are the same thing as the words he used before with growth. As we're continuously growing, we will cease to die. We will cease to grow old. As we move forward, we cannot move backwards. When the mind is living on the sunny side, every action of the mind becomes constructive. Everything in this system is purified as it is in the power of the sunshine to produce purity everywhere. Whether the sunshine be physical or mental, in all the elements the conditions of the personality are made wholesome. It is a tendency of cheerfulness, brightness, and mental sunshine to make everything in the system pure and wholesome. And when the mind is in continual sunshine, only that which is wholesome will exist in the human system. Conditions of age, however, are not where everything is not wholesome. Therefore, they cannot exist in a system where everything is whole. That is, when man is living on the sunny side, when man is living in harmony with himself, when man is not eating, when man has a goal of losing weight and getting fit. Not only is he believing and envisioning that and being positive that it's possible for him, but he's also eating right and exercising and doing the things both on the mental plane and on the physical plane in congruence. They have to be in congruence, and only for us to really create the things that we're looking to create in the outer. To train the mind to live on the sunny side, the greater possibilities that are latent in all life should be constantly analyzed with the deepest of interest. The mind that knows what is possible in the vast domains of the greater human mentality will never become pessimistic nor depressed. To such a mind, life is exceedingly rich. Every moment is not only a promise of greater things, but a positive assurance of realizations that far transcend the life of the present. There is nothing but brightness in store for the mind that sees the richest possibilities of life, and that is constantly moving forward into the fuller realization of those riches. The greater good and the greater joy must inevitably develop in such a life. To hold the greater possibilities of life constantly before the mind is necessary, because the mental eye, which is the mind's eye, which exists within your pineal gland. The pineal gland is the only organ in the body that has rods and cones, just as the physical eyes do. Except the rods and cones of your physical eyes exist outside, while the rods and cones inside your mind's eye, your pineal gland, exist inside. And it's responsible for your imagination. Very interesting. It's very cool. Now, where were we? When the mind is trained to see only that which has sunshine in it, that which looks bright and promising will continue to live in brightness, and to live in brightness is to realize every promise that brightness has in store. When there seems to be no sunshine in the external world, the mind should turn its attention wholly upon the sunshine that always does exist in the internal world. To look into the deeper life is to find unlimited possibilities ready for man to develop. And to see these riches of real life will give sunshine and joy to any mind. To know what man can attain and accomplish is to give perpetual sunshine to the mind. And this any mind may know by turning attention upon the greatness of the great within, upon the world within, upon mind, upon his thoughts, upon his feelings and his emotions. And as Jesus would mention, being the kingdom of heaven, for as we first seek this kingdom, all things will be added unto us. For the kingdom is the only real reality, the world within. To live in the larger world and to move constantly forward into the fuller realization of the larger world is to live in the light of the greater life. And to live in this light is to be in real sunshine, the sunshine that makes existence an endless moment of everlasting joy. To train the mind to live in the upper story of thought and consciousness, the first essential is to give clear recognition to the fact that there is an upper region of mental life. And this is what Jesus the Messiah had figured out for himself. And so did Siddhartha the Buddha. We have to be able to overcome the world in our thinking. That is what it means by when it says that they have overcome the world. We will be able to overcome the world and not allow the thoughts of the world to stop us from doing what we know is the reality and is the truth. Because where truth is employed, sunlight and light is manifested. Light is created. Miracles are created. To train the mind to live in the upper story of thought and consciousness, the first essential is to give clear recognition to the fact that there is an upper region of mental life. And the second essential is to give attention only to those thoughts, ideas, feelings, and states of mind that have an ascending tendency. To live in a worried, depressed mental atmosphere and to enter into close sympathy with such mental conditions is to give mind a descending tendency. In consequence, the mind will enter the lower state of consciousness, where everything is clouded, confused, and listless. While the mind is in this attitude, all work is hard work, and no faculty or mental force is at its best. But when the mind is in the upper story, Everything that is done is well done, is done well, and without the least effort. When the mind is in the upper story, it has life and power, more life and power, and intelligence is far more brilliant. The reason why is found in the fact that all the ascending forces of mind are creative. That is, they generate what may be termed a form of mental electricity, a force that produces both power and light. And to live in the upper story is to cause every action of the mind to become an ascending and rising action. Why? Because to be positive and to live in the upper portion of consciousness is to stay expanded and to be an expanded state of mind. And that expanded state of mind involves unity with your environment. You're going to be, the more awake you become to the realities of things, and the more you see the reality of things, the more you will be influenced by, and the more you'll be able to see and determine what's bad, what's wrong, what's good, and what's right. It's amazing. It's amazing. It develops within you. It's just something that you pick up on, and yeah, it's amazing. Like I sit here, I read these books, I go over this within myself too, and not only that, but when I do go out there, let's say if I go grocery shopping, I feel the effects of me reading these books. I feel it in my mind because it's metaphysical. It's on the inner plane. I'm changing. My thoughts are changing. They're moving, and since my thoughts are changing, my life is changing in a new direction. And when I keep doing what I want to do and I'm working to become who I truly want to be, then my life will eventually externalize that I will eventually externalize that reality in my life. And one day, everybody will know Corey Anderson, and people will know that name, and people will know the things that he did. And I will have these videos recorded so they could see my progress and be inspired and know that they can do something like that too. Just as amazing. It is amazing. To live in the lower story, however, is to cause every action of mind to go down. And to go down, every action of mind to go down. And to go down is to enter weakness, darkness, and nothingness. That it is impossible to do anything of real worthwhile living. It is impossible to do anything of real worth, quote, art, comma, they need a comma right there, while living in the lower story is therefore evident. That it is impossible to do anything of real worth while living in the lower story is therefore evident. Now that sounded better. To train the mind to live in the upper story, it is necessary to, quote, count everything joy, end quote. The happy actions of mind are invariably rising actions, while those actions are not animated with joy will move into the opposite direction, thus taking the mind to the lower story. And as we mentioned before, what is that one thing that could help bring us into a higher state of mind? And that is gratitude, being grateful for things. I am thankful for my health. I am thankful for my wealth. I am thankful for my wisdom. I am thankful that I can make a decision to do something, and the universe will conspire to help me in my journey, regardless of what it is. There's nothing that you can't do. If you want to be somebody, all you need to do is make the decision to be that and start taking action to move in that direction. Now, remember, everything takes energy, and your consciousness is nothing but energy, the same energy of which this universe is made out of. And when you put your mind and focus this consciousness on a specific task, you're putting the very force of life into that task. It's going to be created no matter what. It has to be created. It is a law. You can have, be, or do anything you want. To count everything, joy becomes a matter of ease when the meaning, the purpose, and the possibilities of life are understood, because to know life is to live for the purpose of living a greater life. And in the life of him who lives for a greater life, all things will work together for the building of the greater life. And it does that through what? The law of attraction. The fact that all things work together for good to him who desires only the good, and who desires the good with all the power of heart and soul, is a fact that has been universally demonstrated. Therefore, the mind that desires only the good can readily count everything joy. To such a mind everything will produce joy, and the more fully he enters into the soul of his expectation of joy from everything, the more joy he will receive from everything. The more you love life, the more life will love you back. It is also a demonstrated fact that he who counts everything joy will, through the attitude of mind, cause everything to produce joy, because mind creates reality, and in our external world is directly influenced by our current state of consciousness. That with which we come in contact in life invariably responds to the actions of our mental attitudes. Man is the master of his environments, his conditions, and his circumstances. But he masters these things not by trying to control them, but by controlling himself, by placing himself in those mental attitudes through which the forces of his own being will be directed and produce what he desires to produce. Now that is the key right there. And that is what I mentioned earlier. And that is what we are here to do, to help educate people and to teach people that they have the power to do that for themselves and to create the life that they want to create and to become who they want to become, because all the forces of his own being will move in an environment, and his environment must move to meet with that change. And whoever will apply this law in every action will place his own life absolutely in his own hands. This is one of the great immutable laws of life, which is the law of attraction. When the individual mind counts everything joy and lives in the happy thought that all things work together for good, the forces of that thought are directed to work only for the good and for the producing of joy in everything that transpires. In consequence, all the forces of environment will also work together for the good of that individual, and will cause everything in the world of circumstance to give joy to that individual. Every action in such a life will be an ascending action, and the mind will constantly live in the upper story. To train the mind to live in the upper story, it is also necessary to live in the happy thought that all things can be turned to good account. And it is the truth that you are turning all things to good account when you feel that you are turning everything in yourself to good account. The forces of your own environment will invariably turn the way you turn. It is therefore extremely important that everything in your own being be turned towards a greater goal in life, because our mind will move our life. Our mind moves us in the direction, moves our life, us in our life, in the direction of where it's moved, in where it's at. It is necessary, however, that the actions of your turning be strong and positive. What you decide to do, you must do with all the power of mind and soul. And what you desire, you must desire with a force that is absolutely irresistible. It has to be a burning desire. It has to be something you totally just want. That you can't go another day without having it, because it is who you are. And until you experience that within your life, you will never be contented, because it is a dream that you are working so hard to achieving and to having and to living. Nobody, as Wallace D. Waddell says in The Science of Being Great, any man who can picture a better life for himself will not be content. And that's perfectly fine, because uncontent is a creative state. It creates more desire for the soul to achieve more, to have more, to become more, because we must be something before we could have something. We must be more before we could have more. But this force must not be domineering. The domineering force is the weakest force of all. The strong force is the deep and irresistible, but so calm, so gentle, and so silent that it conquers without apparently making the slightest effort to do so. Now, it's amazing that he says that, and it's a very interesting concept, because I want to talk about another concept that could be very, that resembles exactly what he said right there. because it's not the strongest force. It's not the strongest that breaks through, but the most consistent. It has to be consistent. Just like that river, when you see a river, the only reason why that river is able to break through that rock, it's not from the power of the current that's flowing through that river. It's the consistency, the persistence of the power that's flowing through that river. Because the mind that works, let's say 30 minutes over a period of 6 days, accomplishes more than the mind that works 1 hour. Well, let's say 3 times 6 is 18. It's 180 hours. 180 hours that you would put in a week. So 180 hours that you're working consistent is better than straight 180 hours of just non-stop, which you would have to be pretty much non-human to do, because who the freak could work 180 hours straight? But the point of this is, it's not about going to the gym once and hitting it hard and killing yourself that day and not going back the day after. You're better off just going to the gym, doing a little bit, getting a little bit sore, and you're still good to go again the next day. That is how you achieve the most results, and that is what he's saying here. Persistence, consistency wins the game, not the most strength and not the most force. In consequence, the mind may continue without any effort whatever to live in any attitude that may be necessary to promote his purpose in view, whether present circumstances favor that attitude or not. But circumstances will begin to favor that attitude and begin to aid the mind in promoting its purpose if the mind continues in its own favored attitude, absolutely unmoved and undisturbed. It has to be. It can't be disturbed. You have to maintain a subtle state of consciousness, one specific point of consciousness. Because if we do move our thoughts, or if we do change the fabric of our own mind, we're going to change the fabric of what's surrounding us in the external world. To gain the supreme control over its own position will enable the mind to remain constantly in the upper story and on the sunny side, regardless of the fact that many things in the outer world may tend to draw thought and consciousness down into darkness and depression. And by remaining undisturbed in the upper story and on the sunny side, the mind will cause the forces of adverse circumstances to change, because external cannot affect the internal. Internal creates the external. So even if we're going through something external that is darkness and bad, and we don't let it affect where we are in our mind, we will in turn transmute that darkness into something that is good, because as within, so without, it has been influenced by your light, your mind, and your creative power. In consequence, many causes of old age, It is therefore evident that the mind can be so thoroughly trained to live in the upper story and on the sunny side that those attitudes will become second nature. In consequence, many causes of old age conditions will be removed, and several of the principal causes of perpetual youth will be promoted to the highest degree. Among these we find growth, progress, advancement, and development, and the mind should live firmly in the conviction that old age cannot possibly enter the human system so long as the forces of growth and development are in full, continuous action. Now that is the end of chapter 15 from our book, How to Stay Young. Now one quote I want to end this with, because we know that it takes a great deal to change your mind. It takes a great deal to change the fabric of your own consciousness. It takes a great deal to change what you're thinking, especially if you've been thinking that thought for the last many, many years. It's not easy. It's not easy to change. We can't just expect it to learn all this and just be that right away. You can't just expect to get started on your journey into being who you want to be and chasing your dream and just be that already and to be that quickly. Remember, it's a progress. Success is the progressive realization towards a worthy ideal. That is said by Earl Nightingale. We need to progress towards that ideal, that idea, that vision, that dream we have that's worthy to us. We need to progress towards that vision every single day. That's success. That's success. Because in that journey, in that progression, we will become the person we need to be in order to finally achieve that. And one day when you do move into that state, and when it does become who you are, habitually who you are, then that's when, as within, so without, as above, so below, when that habitual mental state of consciousness will outpicture itself in your outer reality. So with all that being said, that quote by Socrates was, "Don't waste your time or energies on fighting the old. Instead, focus all your time and your energies on creating the new." And if you have a bad habit that you're trying to change, don't waste time trying to fight against that habit. That just creates resistance and more frustration within yourself. Instead, search for something else. Search for something else you can do that you can love. Start questioning, what can I do to feel better? That's what needs to enter your mind. Those are the thoughts that you need to think in order to really start to move into a new way of thinking. The mind is like a computer, and it works like a computer. You need to ask it questions. You need to ask yourself questions, or in order to get answers. In order to get answers, you need to question. In order to get answers from yourself, you need to question yourself. So, all that being said, you know what you need to do, and I'll go ahead and end this right here. And I will see you if you made it to the end of this video with me. Thank you so much for watching. And please subscribe, please share if you haven't done so. I am going to go ahead and sign back in really quick. And yeah, let's end it right here.